Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next generation of content. And thank you for taking the time out of what I'm sure are very busy days to join us. We're extraordinarily excited about this conference. I get to host a lot of conferences here at Knotch, but seldom do I get to host a conference where we know there's an inflection point about to happen and the world of marketing, and specifically content marketing, is about to change forever. We have a fantastic group of folks here today that really represent what Notch is all about. It's about thought leadership. It's about our ability to join and bring community people together, and it's about our technology. So we're very excited to share this and get this kicked off today. I don't have anything else other than to say, please enjoy and be informed for the rest of the day. And with that, I'd like to go ahead and kick off our very first session. And our first session today, our keynote session, is going to be with Amy Avery, who's the SVP and Head of Analytics, Research, and Insights at the Bank of America, and our founder and CEO, Anda. So with that, I will step away and let them have the stage.
Hi.
Hey, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Well, I'm very excited to have this chat with you today. I wish we had, 3 hours, not 30 minutes. I think the last time we chatted, it was 3 hours and it didn't feel like enough. So Amy, welcome. Thank you, first of all. You are a really inspiring force in both the fact that you're, a fellow data nerd, a woman in, the corporate America, and also, if I may say so, a bit of a corporate renegade as well. I think the way you function and you have built your career and the value that you're bringing to Bank of America is not just to kind of, build in silence, but to push the boundaries of digital comfort, let's say, and organizational comfort. And I've seen that in action myself. So very excited to hear from you today on a bunch of fronts. And I thought maybe it would be cool for us to kick it off just to hear a little bit about how you got here. Did you ever think you were going to end up working for Bank of America? I know you came up through the agency world, so really curious how you got here.
It's funny. I think I've always been a nerd, so I had that part going for me right from the very beginning. So the rest was where the journey was, and it's funny. I think I'm going to go like way back, and then I'll get to my decision to go. I grew up in agencies, which, right, they're creative. I love creativity. It's why I worked in agencies. And as a nerd, right, the best thing I can do is to kind of sit behind that. But I was constantly faced with data people who just saw data as numbers, right? They just shared it as facts, but not insights. And they didn't understand emotion. And literally, I used to argue it with my counterpart. I was an account strategy person. He was the head of our business intelligence team back, long time ago. And he always just said, no, that's not possible. No, we don't know that. No, I don't have an opinion on that. And so we used to fight and complain. And finally our boss, who was the CEO, said, why don't the two of you solve this? And so my counterpart said, fine, you try to do my job for a month and see if you're better at it. And I was like, great, I will do your job for a month.
Challenge accepted.
I was stupid enough and arrogant enough to think that was a good idea. But what I'd say he found, and right, I found it was as hard as he said it was, but what he found was that the power of data is in the creativity of it, it's in the storytelling of it. And so I thrived in agencies, right, where you have people who generally try to avoid data when it's in its true like mathy form, but love the concept of having information. And I thought I'd always do it. I was a lifer, I would have said, in the agency world, until Bank of America called. And I was like, I'm not going to do that job, but I will totally go in the interview because I'm curious about it. And then I met.
Why did you think you were not going to do that job? I'm just curious.
It's funny. It's like, there's something in agency culture where it's like, that's the giving up version of you, where it's like, it's where you go to die. It's where you finish your career. And I don't know why it is now that I'm on this side. I'm like, well, that was silly. I wish I had really explored it a little bit sooner. But there's this concept, I think, that you lose your creativity there. And I'd say your creativity changes, and I use it in a different way, but it doesn't die at all. And when I met the people, right, I interviewed with a whole bunch of people before I made the jump. Like, they were inspiring and collaborative. And so I was like, you know what? Give it a try. I've always thrived in places where the odds are against me. I love building a thing where it doesn't seem like it will be possible. Kind of to your renegade point, that's, to me, what's been probably the consistent theme of my career, is going where someone said, that's not a thing, or you can't do that, and just making it change.
That sounds a lot like the things that people would say to me early on. Why do you think you never ended up starting a company or joining a startup?
It's a good question. I often wonder about it. I think in my mind, it was stability. Again, like now that I've aged old enough, I'm like, that was stupid. Stability is what you make. I don't know why that was the weird line, right? They're as though agencies were so stable. So it's kind
right,
of
exactly.
I thought being dependent on my clients was my stability. I don't know. And now at this point in my career, right, I know so many amazing people and I get to watch it and participate, right? I get to know you so well and help you figure out how to grow. And so I feel like I get to do startup, but in my own way. I get to be adjacent to it and I get to start up inside a giant corporation, right? Like what I do at Bank of America is very different than what I think other people do. And so it's my own version of a startup.
Well, I think, to be honest, startups would be completely lost without people like you and John van Brakel and a few others that help us navigate how to like not die, because there's so many more ways to die when it comes to adopting new technologies than ways to live. So I'm very grateful for that. The fact that you can understand that perspective and be a change maker internally, so that we can essentially both enact change in a way that's benefiting everyone. What's been the most surprising thing since you joined Bank of America?
I thought there would be more politics, and I find that there's less, way less. And I think, when I really think about what changed there, it's the competition is gone, right? Everyone is rowing the same boat. You might have a different task in it, but it's not individual P&Ls and it's not different parts of agencies coming together. It's truly everyone. A good idea can come from anywhere. And I think that was really surprising to me. I expected it to be very hierarchical. Right. I expected it to be very corporate, that, and I'd say somewhat I was even warned when I got there that it would be really corporate. But because I'm a studier of human behavior, right, I went in and I was like, that can't be true. Like, they're still people. So, I was surprised to find that you can go all the way to the top and there is as much humanity there as there is at the bottom. And I think that's been surprising. I didn't expect that. I thought maybe that's the part of me that I would give up, but it's not at all. It's been
culture always comes from the top, right? So it makes sense that if you have a great leader, everyone else would sort of be in a similar vein, right? Or enact the same values, because otherwise they wouldn't even kind of belong or be a culture fit at the company.
Yeah, so true. So true.
You know what I find is so interesting about you and how you've approached your career is that there's this level of fearlessness, right? Like people say to you, you can't do this, or like, I can't believe, you're going to figure out how to create this. You were telling me a story a while ago about this model that you built over a weekend yourself to essentially create attribution for marketing dollars and really help prove the effectiveness of marketing. And you were sending it to the CEO of Bank of America, right? And I think what's really interesting is you have this level of fearlessness that just kind of says, you know what, I'm going to go poke, and what's the worst that can happen? Have you always been this way, or was there something along the kind of career path that helped you get there?
I think I've always been that way. I've gotten a lot more confident about it over the years, for sure, right? The more experience you have, the less scary that is. That, I've always had teams that say, why do you say you can do that before you know you can? And so I think that's consistent. And I'm like, we'll find a way. I think you and I have that in common. It's why we hit it off so well, is like this scrappiness of like, I'll find a way to make it happen. Don't worry about it. If I say I can, I will. And I think the confidence in myself, I guess, is probably where that comes from. And the joy of being a pioneer is there isn't a way. Like, there isn't a way ahead of me that someone did it before me. And most of the things that I try to do, I am the first person doing them. So I don't have to conform to a standard, right? The joy of being a renegade is my way will be the way until someone brighter than me says, like, that was stupid, we're doing it a new way. But there's a lot of freedom in that, of not trying to follow a path of someone before you, but of just truly like trusting yourself and running at it.
Yeah, I mean, look, entrepreneurs are very familiar with fake it till you make it. Some more than others. Some they keep faking it until forever. But I think it's definitely this kind of imagination reality gap that we have to be comfortable living in, and constantly pushing reality to get closer to imagination and imagination closer to reality. The one thing, and I didn't send you this question in advance, I hope you don't mind me asking you, but how do you deal with moments where you kind of say, I'm going to go do something, and your team says, you don't even know if it's possible, and then you try and then you fail? How do you deal with that?
I guess you just find a different way, right? I think where I watch people struggle often is it feels like there's going to be one road, and if I had my idea, I've got to stick to that, like that I'll die on that idea. And you've got to be
pivot,
right? How do I take, like, if I got 20% down the path before that path died, like, all right, pick up that 20% and run a new path. And I think it's getting comfortable with that, of like my vision is largely in one direction, right? But it's never a straight path. You've got to kind of bounce around, and right, the whole idea of what I do is trial and error and human understanding. And so if I just keep taking that into effect, I guess, but getting people comfortable with that, I think that's the hard part, right? If you haven't been raised in that mentality, if you haven't been coached by mentors that way, I think that's really terrifying, because the fear of failing is really scary. I think for me, I always had, my earliest boss was really great. And he was like, your failure will be not moving forward. Your failure will never be that you didn't do the right thing when you moved forward. And I was like, okay. And it's kind of freeing to think of it that way. Movement is lack of failure to me.
That's really good advice. So it's essentially a combination between fearlessness and lack of ego or investment in the outcome, and just knowing that you're probably going to have to pivot anyway, right? To get to the solution. It's more that you're just attempting to solve the problem, not that you're committed to a solution.
Yeah, I think, I started in account service early in my agency days, and there, right, it's really where my interest in understanding people came from. But there's give and take, right? If I have a vision, it's never going to be 100% my idea, because I won't have buy-in anyway. If we just say it's my way or the highway, no one's going along with me. But also, like, I'm not the brightest person in the room. I want the input. I want the feedback. I'm surrounded by brilliant people who can make my ideas better if I just don't hold the line. And like, some of the worst things I've ever done were when I said, no, we'll do it my way. And I'm like, that's usually not the best way, right? Collective minds, they're amazing.
I'm sure that sometimes you are the brightest mind in the room. I'm just going to say that. You don't have to react to it. So let's go into what this function means. Because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in some ways the function that you run, which seems to have been growing over the last few years, is a relatively new function within almost every company, but also within Bank of America. So tell us a little bit about what is the kind of remit of this function, and when did it come about?
So I came to the bank to lead a research team. And there's always been a research team. There's always been an analytics team. All of the teams that I have been there. I think the difference is kind of to the point, right, of you don't know where the road is this tool agnostic approach of, if we're really just focused on insights, if I can start with a question, then I can put researchers behind that, modelers behind that, analysts behind that, reporting teams behind that. And so it's structured in a way that brings all of those tools into one big arsenal, I guess, for lack of a better description, is in a way where our goal is not data delivery. Our goal is insights delivery, right? It's, the front end of our team is called data strategy. And it's because it's not data for data's sake. It's data because you do something with it. It's data-driven decisioning. And I think that's probably the new spin. I think there's always been amazing access to information. But I think often what happens is you get really bright people who are told to answer questions. But in fact, what they end up doing is like answering answers, right? Someone says, tell me how many of this. That's not a question. That's an answer. And what I've really tried to push the team, and I think the difference in how I run it is very much, right, push back on that. Like, don't answer answers, answer questions. Make someone ask you a question. What are they solving? What do they want to do when they know a thing? What's the problem they're facing? And I think having so many different skill sets sitting beneath that to be able to answer them, it's really powerful.
Yeah, you were saying to me in one of our previous conversations that data should never be the end of the conversation. It should be the beginning. So you kind of see all these meetings, or I've been in so many of these meetings where you have a slide with a bunch of data and people just look at it and they go, okay, so this is it. But really that's the beginning, right? It should cause all these questions. Why is it this way? How did we get here? What do we do next? And I know that there's kind of a gap between what being able to answer those questions and what data platforms will give you in today's world, because every tech company is obsessed with being a platform and giving you data, not necessarily giving you answers. So how do you think about bridging that gap and a skill set that you would build even within your team to help bridge that gap across so many platforms that you're using?
It's interesting. The number one thing I hire for is curiosity. I used to meet people in the ground floor of the building I worked in when I kind of started interviewing this way. And we would take the elevator together, and there's like, I think it's Captivate does it, and there's like a random fact there. And so, more people get a haircut on Tuesday than any other day. Random fact, right? With no context, you just nod and smile, like you mentioned at a chart. And so I'd say, well, like, why do you think that is? That's weird. And the people who were like, yeah, that is strange, and like didn't think anything of it, I was like, thank you for visiting. You're probably not.
Let's take the ride down.
People were like, do you think there's less meetings on Tuesdays? I wonder, do people get paid on Mondays more often? Like, people that really like the why, the people that did that, those are the people that I want to work, because the technical skills, I can teach those. The curiosity, that's a lot harder to teach people. And I think, right, and then how do I, if the question is why, and you think of all these platforms bringing in new data, like, people have to scratch a little deeper and say why, but like, okay, why did that happen? Will I know this? If it did well, why did it do well? Was it because people liked it? Was it because it was colorful? Was it because it just had a really high frequency? Like, people have to ask those whys, and the answers to those whys have to be available.
Agreed. I really like that. I might try it. I don't know if elevators are as good in today's world as they were back.
Hard in these times.
We'll find an equivalent.
Yeah, really simulate on Zoom, I have to tell you.
I will be like, oh, look at this background. It has an insight. Anyway, your LinkedIn says that you're passionate about data and storytelling. And obviously that's something that I'm really passionate about. And in a really meta way, Knotch is a data platform for storytelling. So kind of bringing it back to content and the theme of today's conference, tell us a little bit about what's easy and what's difficult around content measurement or content intelligence, as we call it.
There's a couple things, I think. One, in my mind, people just don't know where to place content. And the thing is, content lives everywhere, and everything is content, right? If you think about truly what a journey is, I hear all this conversation of decision journeys, right? And people are like, oh, that's because I wake up and I'm cold, so I realize I need a blanket. So then I don't know what's the best blanket, so I research. And it's like, as though it's this very practical set of decisions, but in fact, what sits behind that is emotion constantly. I think that's the piece where I think content really changes, where it serves a purpose everywhere, because, right, then you think of, like, now take a new scenario. Let's say I'm going to rent a new apartment, right? The first thing is that I'm like, people upstairs are so loud, and I'm so tired, and I'm so frustrated. And I'm like, okay, so what is the content that serves to me that helps me understand this might be a good option for me, right? It's nothing about that I want an apartment with however many bedrooms. It's this like frustration of like, the place that's supposed to be my sacred place is not my sacred place anymore, right? And understanding that emotion, content can so easily serve along the journey. But I think you have to have the tools to measure that, right? So then how do I think about, does it trigger an emotion? Does it solve a problem? Do people like the thing, right? Does it interest them? So it can't just be like, did someone click on it, right? I think, right, we pretend that that's the thing of like, oh, well, they didn't click on it, so that content was bad. Like, no, it wasn't. We also, I think, right, that would belie the assumption that everything you do is like you're taking immediate action, right? Content is part of a relationship. It's how you build a connection with someone. It is storytelling. It is, let me unfold this a little bit at a time so that you know me a little bit better. If you think of, right, when you and I met each other, each bit of information I told you about me, that was content. If you think of it that way, we build a relationship. The measure wouldn't have been like, did I ask you for dinner the next day? I'm pretty sure I probably did. But right, the measure would have been like, did I trust you more? Did I feel more connected with you? Right. Were you someone I admire? Right. Those are the things. And so I think when you think of content measurement in those ways, you start really understanding its value.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, a big part of our philosophy is measuring emotion, as you know. But I think it's all about bringing the relevant audience signals together at the relevant point in the journey. Because sometimes people aren't ready to even tell you what their emotion is yet, because you haven't given them enough, right? So then you do attract them with more visibility kind of metrics, and then it's more about emotion, and then it's more about conversion or them actually taking action in some way. But the reason, as a data nerd, I find content intelligence so interesting is because it is so complicated. It's not like ads, right? Like click or not click. It's very binary. And I think what makes it fascinating is that we're sort of entering this world where all digital experiences are complicated to measure and complicated to understand the impact of. So your job must be getting more and more fun, much like our job as a platform is to solve more and more for our problems.
It is. I think the context is so important, right? Is even if you can choose and say, I'm going to use content this way, right? This piece of content does this particular goal and this piece does this. And I think that's so important, is acknowledging like all content doesn't do the same thing.
Right.
But also that it's flexible to say, I might see a really interesting piece of content, but I'm just not in the mood that day. But later, when I am in the mood, I'll be like, I think I saw a piece of content from them. They must be kind of cool, right? And then you go back and you check it out. And so search suddenly is getting the credit. And so thinking about how my content lives in that spectrum, like it is the thing that created my recall.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I know we only have a couple of minutes left, so I want to ask you two questions. The first one is, what do you think, as you kind of think about predictions around storytelling? There's no doubt that content, storytelling, whatever you want to call it, especially digital content, is becoming more and more important for every company out there, right? Because we all need to create more of a value exchange with all of our audiences. So what are your predictions for the future of storytelling?
I think it'll actually evolve to being emotionally led. I think, right, when you think about true storytelling, the thing that makes you lean in, like it's the story, it is the emotion around it, is the how you felt. And I think that when we can think about that journey, I think we'll get there. You know, I feel like as an industry, we've been in fits and starts on that, right? People are afraid of emotion. People try to, right? They need to get emotional about it. They need to lean in and actually care about a person. But I think that will change. So if I think 3 years from now, right, if people stop being afraid of that, and I think we've been through a world that kind of makes you reassess it. We're at a time where like you could truly, storytelling can be a connective thing, a thing that brings people together. I also think that people will acknowledge that content comes in a lot of forms, right? There's this assumption of like content is this type of video or this type of thing, and it's so many more things than that. And I think holistically then how it can live and breathe and how it can connect the dots and how you can, you know, like a book, right? You can pick it up and put it down and come back into it at a different spot, right? I think it'll shift that way, that you've actually start acknowledging its role versus beyond what it seems so obvious that it is, right? As a marketer, it's obvious to me that it's a way to connect. But I think we'll shift there.
I want to ask you a quick follow-up question, because I know there's a lot of content leaders listening, and having met a lot of them, there's a genuine struggle to adopt new metrics. So if we all agree that you know, emotion is one of the important metrics or signals that we want to look for, how do you think a content leader should talk to their data team and their business unit stakeholders to convince them that this is an important metric to look at alongside lead gen or clicks or whatever kind of the more traditional metrics are?
Right, like as the data nerd in me, one of the very first things I did when I was interested in content was I actually went into social listening. I coded things by emotion and I ran a regression analysis against sales. And I was like, guys, it is connected. And so I started convincing the data people that I was like, I don't just like emotion for emotion's sake. I like emotion because it's related to a business metric. And I think building that connection is important. Then, right, the business metric will come. I know that the early indicator of it is emotion. And I can figure out which emotions matter, right? Not all of them matter equally. Not all of them are the same. And I think the cool thing of emotion is it's the nuance of it, right? Like positive and negative, that's not enough. Right? That would assume that like and love are the same thing. They're not. And so I think helping people understand the nuance of it, I think relating it to how does someone feel about a message is our win. I think you have to talk about your goals differently. Our goal is to make someone smile. Our goal is to make someone think. And what is the emotional measure of that? There's so many amazing tools for measuring it. It's why we hit it off so early. It's why we partner with Knotch. It gives me a way to actually understand that, but also it ties to business performance. It's not just because I love emotion, it's because emotion generates revenue.
So you start by kind of putting a stake in the ground and saying, this is connected to sales ultimately. And then you kind of work back to, okay, now that we understand that and we're bought into it, let's figure out how do we study the granularity of emotion and how it impacts the customer journey. I love that. It's great advice. So final question. Do you have any work or life mantras that you want to share with us today?
It's for sure, my daughter would say, hope is not a strategy is probably the thing I say most often.
It's such an interesting thing to say to a teenager.
I feel like I say it to everyone, but I'm like, you don't just get to wish it. And it's sort of right, that fearlessness of like, go make it happen, go do the thing. If you want the job, go walk up to the person. If you want to create a metric, go do it. You want to start a business, do it. Like, wishing for it isn't enough. I think there's probably that. I think there's also the concept of never waste a good crisis. It's what I use.
Very relevant.
If I think of the last year, and that stick with me for a minute because I now sound like a horrible human, but I mean internally, right, in Bank of America, there was a great opportunity for my team to be able to step up in a very different way than we ever had shown ourselves, right? To say, there is this thirst for information and an understanding of human emotion and how they feel, and take advantage of that. Show what this team is capable of, right? Don't waste that good crisis. And I think that has driven me a lot. And I think probably the third is that like people don't lean in for a really good piece of data, right? Like that's no one really like, I love data, love it, but it's not what anyone else cares about. It's what the data means. And I think there's that, right? It's, as analysts, we all feel really, it's important to show all of our work. Here's a 900 charts that prove the insight I'm about to tell you. Like, no one cares. Don't show the 900 charts. So I think probably that.
I love that. That's all really, really good advice. Thank you so much, Amy. Really appreciate the time today and the super candid chat. And I can't wait to catch up in person again soon.
Yeah, same here. It's really great to see you. Thanks for the time.
Good to see you too. Thank you. Bye-bye.